record on. Today, I'm joined by Valerie Recore, a productivity specialist, a time giver, and a certified Fair Play Method facilitator. Valerie gives moms a sense of control, spend more time with their families, and end their days feeling accomplished. I love on her website, it says, imagine sitting on the back porch with a good book and a glass of wine and not feeling guilty, or spending an evening watching movies and eating popcorn with your kids without wondering what tasks you should be doing. I can totally relate. Valerie has a background in mental health and corporate training and is here to give us tools to get some time back. You may just be everyone's hero, Valerie. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I'm really happy to have you here. I think first, just to give listeners context, like, have you struggled with this sense of overwhelm, or have you always known how to delegate and master the task list?
I certainly have had times in my life where my task list or to-do list has ruled me over instead of me having control over it, where there's days or weeks where I'm just feeling very overwhelmed by everything that's on the list and feeling I must do everything because it's written down and on my list, so it must happen now, instead of being able to take a step back and go, does this need to happen this week or at all or by me? And figuring out kind of what is more important to me and what I need to be focusing on. And so that's really why a big part of why I do this work is because I've been there and I get it. And I have fallen into all of the social conditioning that society has given to moms of all of the things that we need to be doing, and realizing that none of it is true and that we have some control. We have control over how we're spending our days.
And so is this where you think this like inequity of workload is coming from, is societal conditioning?
I think that's a big part of it. That mental load of moms, I think, comes from a variety of places. Sometimes it's ourselves. We kind of bring it on ourselves, but I think it's because of that social conditioning. We fall into that of, okay, in order to be a good mom, I must do all of these things. And we've been taught that that's what we need to do, right? From a young age, girls are given baby dolls and toy kitchens and told that your worth is all about how you look and the state of your house and how your kids are behaved and how they look every day and all of that. And we don't do that for men. It's very different conditioning for men. We don't hand them babies when they're kids and dolls and say, play with this because you're going to be a dad someday. And so we grow up to that. And then when we have kids, if you are lucky to get leave, women are more likely to have that leave. Men are not, or they don't take it. They're not encouraged to take it. Their offices might have it, but nobody takes paternal leave. So people don't do it in their office. And so then moms just kind of get better at all of this stuff. It's not that we're naturally better at all of it, but we just get better by the fact that we have to. And dads don't always get that opportunity or that chance. And so then here we are years later wondering why things are so unequal and inequitable in our house. And it's just all of these years of this stuff building up. And then it's really hard to change, right? Because it's so ingrained in us that it feels like it takes a very big overhaul to fix things.
Yeah, and you mentioning this, like, it's ingrained, and also there's years of resentment build up. And so, at least in my experience, and talking to friends, like, it's a charged topic to even know how to confront.
It is. And I fully understand that. And I know where that resentment comes from. And there's also that piece of, in all likelihood, our partners were raised by moms who did everything for them. And so it's not that your partner doesn't want to help. They don't know how, or we don't know how to step back as moms and give them that space to try it on their own, right? We're going to watch them change a diaper and they're going to struggle with it because we've done it many more times. And so we step in and we do it instead of letting them figure it out. And so many more things on top of that. But I think it's less that our partners don't want to help, as they're not given that chance, or they just straight up don't know everything it takes to run a household because they were never modeled that. They never saw that. They don't understand. And it's not that they don't want to, They don't know it. And then that status quo is working for them, right? Like, why
Yes,
change? If things are working for them, what's their motivation to shift things? And so
absolutely.
how do we then deal with our resentment in a way that helps them bring them in as a partner versus nagging and yelling, and sort of dealing with that resentment first is kind of a big step.
Yes, such a good point. Um, so when you are working with women who are feeling this sense of, well, I guess let me back up first. I think that for me, one of the things that is hard to still undo, even though we have our lists of ways that now that we separate our tasks and such, is like so much of the work is invisible work, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
my mind is ruminating over all the details that need to be held together in a way that my husband doesn't hold those details.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is that? Because I feel like it's sometimes you can't even just divvy it up on a list.
Yeah. So that falls into like it's the invisible load. It's that mental load that moms take on, as you were like the ticker tape that's constantly running through our head of the things that we're thinking about. And that's getting into, and lists don't always work because they don't show all of the mental load behind those lists. They're not showing all of the steps that it takes to think of and plan. They're the execution piece of everything.
Hmm.
They don't
It's the
show all the
action.
behind the scenes work.
Yeah.
And so there's still that mental load. And it's as you mentioned in my bio, I'm a certified fair play facilitator, and the fair play method gets into all of this. It makes that invisible load visible because it takes your lists and it shows you, or it gets you to talk about and think about that entire process from conceiving of something that needs to happen to executing it.
Okay, I want to hear
And
about. Oh, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. That's
Well,
fine.
I had just never heard about the fair play method. And so I was so excited to learn about it and then doing research. It's like there's a lot out there about it. So I'm
Mhm.
glad that you're going here and I was just going to say yay. Like tell us everything.
Yeah. So Fair Play is a book written by a woman named Eve Rodsky, and it came out, I believe, in 2019. And when I discovered it, I just thought it was the most amazing thing ever because we spend a lot of time, there are all sorts of books talking about how angry moms are and women are about this inequity. And here came an answer that brings our partners in as partners, whether you have kids or you have roommates or you are co-parenting from two households, whatever that looks like, this method can help you cover all of those bases and make sure that it's not just on one person to remember everything. So it starts with, I'll talk about it as a deck of cards. There's a deck of cards that you can get in addition to the book. You don't need the cards, but for the sake of this conversation, it's just easier to talk about the cards. And so you have a deck of cards and you build your own deck. So my deck is going to look different from your deck because our families are different, our lives are different, our values might be different, our goals are different. And so you build your deck based upon what's important to you and your family. And what I love about that is that one of the very first conversations you're having is discussing all of your values and what is important to you and what you can let go of. So an easy one would be, we don't do Christmas cards or holiday cards. We just don't send them out. I don't want to take the time. There's a lot of steps involved in the whole thing. Other people might love doing that, or they feel obligated to. But to sit down and have a conversation about why we're doing them and why they're important, then get your partner involved in the understanding why we're taking family pictures in September and why it's so important that we have our address list updated in October, and like all of the steps that are taken to get those cards out come early December or Christmas or whatever, whenever they leave and land in people's mailboxes. But there are multiple steps involved, and you get to talk about why you're doing something. So another example I love are birthday parties. Do we throw elaborate birthday parties for our kids or not? And are you doing it because everybody else is doing it, or because you just straight up love going overboard for your kids? And we have friends who know that they go overboard and they love it. We tend towards can you just invite a couple of people over for a slumber party, and we'll make a big deal out of it, but we're not inviting everybody we know. And a few weeks ago, I was talking with somebody whose teenage daughter commented on how she doesn't like the birthday parties that her mom had been. They were over the top, and she didn't enjoy them. And mom felt bad because she's been doing this thing she felt she needed to do year after year, probably wearing herself out, and it wasn't necessary. And so if you love throwing birthday parties, understand that you should continue doing them. Don't hear me saying you should just knock it off. But if you do it and you resent them, then think about why you're doing them. And that's like that building your deck piece is getting you to talk about all of this stuff and what is important to you, and letting go of things that maybe you're doing because you feel societal pressure to do it. But maybe when you stop, other people in your circle will stop too, because you're all this kind of feeding off of each other. Oh, well, our neighbor had a bouncy house and a petting zoo at their last birthday party, and so we better do this thing over here because we have to at least match, if not go over what they did, because that's what people do. And it's like, well, but maybe you just have a simple barbecue, or you just take it back. And so that's the first piece of it, is really getting into building your deck and talking about what that looks like. And then from there, you each take a card. You start divvying up cards from there. And the goal is not to get to 50-50, because some cards are going to involve more work than others, right? Taking the trash out is going to look different from helping your kids with their homework every day, or registering and taking care of the kids' after school activities. Those are important tasks, but they're a different amount of effort, right? There's a whole section of tasks that Eve calls the daily grind. And these are the things like taking out the trash, making breakfast, making dinner, both separately for the weekend and the week, getting the kids up and out the door, things that have to happen in a certain time frame. And those are designed to really be shared between the adults in the house, or really you could get your family involved as well. But things like my husband and I share the dishes. So we've divided ours up. So Sunday through Saturday, one of us is fully in charge of loading and unloading the dishwasher and hand washing anything. And then by Sunday morning, it all has to be cut up. So whoever takes over on Sunday isn't spending the day doing lots of dishes, catching up from the week before. And that's really our only rule. Like, the kitchen has to be clean enough that I can make breakfast. I'm usually the first one up. So I come in and I'll be making breakfast, but I get really cranky if the kitchen is such that I have to clean it before I make breakfast. That might look different in your house. You might want to trade that off every day. So Monday it's one person, Tuesday it's another person. And by 9 p.m., everything has to be cleaned up and dealt with and ready for the next person. And so you're going to talk about what that looks like and come up with what Eve calls the minimum standard of care. And so that is the agreed upon kind of level of how well a task is completed, which I think can also be one of the stickiest points, because it's not, well, my standards are higher than yours, so I win. It's, how do we find this mutually agreed upon place, right? Like, the kitchen might not be as clean during the week that my husband is in charge as it might be during mine, but then I get, our work days look different, and we are okay, we've kind of agreed upon those standards. And so I can just walk away because it's not my week and I'm not going to worry about it. And there we are. And so it's having those conversations that get you to that point. I can keep going. I want to make sure that I'm making sense and not like veering off.
No, I know you definitely are making a ton of sense, and I do hope you'll keep going. But just you speaking about like the different expectations with each task made me consider how just opening up the conversation of the values and then divvying them up, I assume, allows for a lot more like grace and forgiveness, because there's already been a conversation. And so it's easier to, you were saying, like, the kitchen might not be as clean the weeks your husband does it, but because you've kind of already talked about it, it makes it easier rather than annoying every time.
Hmm.
Or at least
Yeah.
that's how I would
Absolutely.
translate
Yeah.
it.
And you can have, like, I'm not going to say that right out of the gate, everything is going to be perfect, that you're going to sit
Ah,
down on a Sunday night and build your deck and have this conversation and then things are going to magically change. Like, it takes time to make that shift. And I wouldn't recommend, I would suggest building your deck first, but then just picking a few cards, whether they're the stickiest pieces of your household that you want to change. Like the dishes were a big thing. My husband and I both work from home. The dishes were driving me crazy because my desk is right next to the kitchen. And so that was one of the first conversations we had, was how do we fix this? Because the dishes are taunting me and I feel like it's my job every day to deal with them. And that doesn't feel good. And he did not care at all. He just knew we were going to get to them eventually. And so having that conversation where now somebody is fully in charge takes that off my plate when it's not my week. And then when it is my week, I can deal with that. And things like trash, we don't take our trash out every week before trash day. It's just kind of as the trash needs to be filled, and that works for us. But you might be like, we need to take the trash out every day, or trash is picked up on Tuesday. And so Monday night, somebody needs to walk around the house and take all of the trash out. And who is in charge of that? And what does that look like? And having that as your starting point. And then having a regular, like a weekly check-in, especially at the beginning, where you make it's like dinner. You're going to sit down, just the two of you, over a glass of wine or a cup of tea. Maybe the kids are watching a movie or they're in bed, or time where you can just check in and say, hey, is this working? What fell apart this week and why? What can we shift going forward? And having those conversations in a way that gets both of you on the same team. So it's not, look, we did this thing and you screwed it up this week. And oh my God, I can see that we're never going to get anywhere. Like, really working through, like, it might be that you need to work through some of your resentment separately with a counselor, somebody, to kind of offload all of that, so you're not bringing that to your conversations. But knowing that it's going to take some time to build, and then building on the deck as you get in the habit of, okay, so the dishes and the trash are working. What's next? Okay, our kids' homework, they really need help, somebody to sit down with them every day. What does that look like? Who's in charge of that? Okay, I really don't want to be in charge of signing the kids up for soccer in the fall. Can you please take that over? And here are all of the things that entails. It's not just showing up to games. It is, registration is on this day, and they need to make sure, like, there might be some knowledge transfer. If you've been doing something for a really long time, how do you transfer all of that to another person? And then being able to step back and let them do it in their own way, and figuring all of that out. But over time, what will happen is that you have less on your brain because you are not in charge of everything. Somebody else is dealing with some tasks. Or you also know that, say, every Sunday night, you're going to sit down with your partner and you're going to talk about this stuff. So Wednesday morning, you wake up, something didn't happen and you're frustrated. You now have a scheduled place to put that and deal with it, instead of letting it simmer and coming out in some snide comment. You have a space for that to be discussed and sorted out.
I love the mindfulness of it. So intentional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really, there's just so much involved, and you can just take bits and pieces of it. Like, you don't have to overhaul your life this weekend by doing all of this. Just do a little bit at a time. Even have the values conversations and the building your deck a little bit at a time. Pull out all the daily grind cards and talk about those first, because those might have a really big impact on your daily life. And remembering that those are not one person is supposed to be in charge of something forever and ever. Mm. And in our household, we don't hold true to that. I make breakfast almost every day, most days, because I am up before my husband. He's in charge of dinner and grocery shopping, and he has been for the last couple of years. And he's just thoroughly taken that on. I don't like to cook. He enjoys cooking. Fully taken that on. We will help meal plan. We are working on that as a family. My kids are 7 and 10 and it's long past time for them to help with meal planning. So getting them involved in that, maybe getting them involved in cooking, putting away groceries, but it's not something that I am thinking about all of the time. I will add something to the grocery list if I finish it off, but I am not the one in charge of figuring out what we need and buying and all of that. He does that. And we don't switch those back and forth because that doesn't work for us. Like I will take over cooking dinner if I need to, right? But that's what works for us. And so not also feeling like, okay, well, this book says we must follow these exact steps, like tweak it for what makes sense for your family and make it work for you in a way that helps you going forward.
So cool. I have a ton of questions because, like I said, the fair play method is new to me. So, and I wish I would have had it years ago. I now have like 16 and 19-year-olds, and I feel like, we're kind of at the end, but it was definitely something that we would have really benefited from as a family. So I guess my first question is, are the cards created for the whole family rather than just the parental unit?
So originally they were designed for just the parents or roommates, like your 19-year-old, if they're headed off to college, could totally use. I mean, they're not going to need the entire deck, obviously, but something that they could use with their roommates. Let's talk about what this looks like, sort of like their chore chart, but in a slightly different manner. They did just come out with a whole curriculum for elementary, for like K-12, I think, divided up by elementary, middle, and I think high school for bringing kids on board. And I would say, like, certainly bring your kids into the whole thing. Bring them into those conversations. Maybe the first few conversations involve just you and your partner, but then going forward, you do get your kids involved and have those, because then they know what's going on. They get a say in it. Like I don't want an elaborate birthday party, or yes, I want a petting zoo, or whatever that looks like. Because kids need to know all of this stuff. My kids have plenty of times just said, I don't understand what mom does all day. I'm like, well, it's because you don't see it. And there is a lot. And how do you think that your socks end up clean in your laundry basket every day? Or not every day, but when they do. And I would highly recommend that you bring them in to those conversations and get them involved in that. Absolutely.
I love it. I love what I like about it is we always had lists our kids have always been involved in like household chores, but it was coming from us. And there's something really nice about it coming from an outside source, like all the lists, just like everything with parenting, they'll listen more to somebody else than to us. So I think it's really cool to have a tool like that to work with kids.
Yeah, we've always, when we do chores with our kids, and my household is kind of, I think I Googled this. I forget where I came across a list of like age appropriate chores. And so then I'll sit down with my kids. I think we'll do it at the beginning of the school year. Okay, here's how old you are. And then look at the list of like, here are all the things you already should be doing, half of which we haven't covered. And so like, maybe we need to start here, but then like pick a couple of things and let's work on that. So for a while they were helping empty the dishwasher. And my 10-year-old helps with the laundry. And so getting them involved and knowing that it's going to take some time with you doing it with them if it's something that they've never been taught how to do. So my 10-year-old now can sort her laundry. Their laundry is washed separately from the parents, and she moves it from the washer to the dryer and into a laundry basket and sorts it for her and her sister. And she can handle that. She doesn't need my help. She can do that. My 7-year-old needs help putting her laundry away. She knows how to do it. She just doesn't want to. So if I ever want it done, we have to do it together and then it happens. So it's just knowing what's appropriate for your kids and knowing that nobody likes to do chores alone. It's not fun.
Yeah.
And so if you can make it fun, and then it's more likely to happen, or do it together. Like, hey, it's Saturday morning. We're going to spend the next hour cleaning the house together. What does that look like? Can you help me dust? Here's a duster. Do you want to pick the music? And we'll play some music and we'll dance around the living room dusting together. However you can make it fun, it's more likely to happen. And then just getting them involved, knowing that eventually they're going to be able to do something on their own, but you need to get that knowledge transfer done first and support them through that until they're ready, versus just saying, go clean your room. Like
Yes.
that's too much work. I'm not going to do it.
I'm a big fan. I was a Montessori teacher for young kids when I first started working, and part of the training there is like teaching them to do it themselves, right from a very early age. So kids really want to participate, to be part of the family in this way, and I think to your point, like doing it in a way that's theirs, that matches them, making it
Mm-hmm.
fun, making it upbeat, not a punishment, not like now you need to go do this, but like this is a way to collaborate and pitch in with the family. I think parents are um, like slow to get kids involved, and kids can help in the kitchen, when they're very,
Mm-hmm.
very young, much younger than you probably think they're able, with the right tools and stuff, and laundry. Those are such great ways to get started. I love
Mm-hmm.
that you're highlighting this. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
So, so for people who are listening and are like, okay, I want more of this, a good way to start is with the book or with the cards.
I would start with a book.
Mm-hmm.
If that feels daunting, there's a documentary.
Oh wow.
I know it's on Hulu. I think it's on a couple of other places. Watch it with your partner. Watch it first by yourself if you think your partner isn't interested, but I would suggest watching it together if you can talk them into it. It's like an hour and a half. And it doesn't get into the method, but it lays the foundation for why the method is so important. And it's huge. And even doing this work, my husband and I watched it together, and I still learned a few things. And I would pause it and like, I didn't know that. And like he hears me talk about this stuff all the time, and he learned some things. And so it's a great starting point to understand, to get both of you, especially your partner, to understand what's going on and why this is such a big deal, and that there is something out there to help you. And so the book gets into the whole method. I highly recommend reading it. And then the deck of cards is the tool that you're going to use when you implement this in your life, when you're ready to take those steps and make them a reality. Then the deck, it's not necessary, but I think it's really helpful to just have as that visual to focus on as a conversation piece. And so you can really just have that as part of implementing the whole method.
It sounds like the deck would be super helpful just in creating like a framework or a template for like some starting points. Because like you said, everybody's tasks might be different, but it's hard to look at a blank sheet of paper and be like, okay, what do I do every day,
Yeah. And then you can have that visual, like hang them up on a board. This week, this person is in charge of this. And then the next line is, who's in charge of what this week, and changing that around as necessary or as you're having those conversations. But giving you that visual to have, I think, is just easier. And it may have cards in there that you wouldn't have thought of that you needed to talk about, and bring up things that way as well. And I think that can be really helpful.
I have so I've talked about this topic of mental load a couple of times. It's come up on my podcast, and one time was with my therapist and my marriage therapist, because she is the first person that introduced this idea of mental load to us. And something I thought was really interesting that she said was like, when we free ourselves of everything that we're trying to keep track of, it kind of is a gift for the other people to, one, support, right? But two, like explore their own interests and things that may not have been available to them yet. And the example that she gave, which reminds me maybe of your situation, is she had always done the cooking, and she does not like cooking. And so that was just one thing. She's like, I can't do this anymore. Like the whole meal planning, grocery shopping, like that's the end of my rope. And so her husband took it on, and he never knew how much he loved cooking, but he's totally fallen in love with the whole process. And so she's like, that's something that like he never would have discovered about himself had she kept plowing through thinking it was up to her to do. And I think that that's a really cool way just to, well, put a positive spin on it, really.
I love that. Yeah. And one of the end goals really of the Fair Play method is what's called the happiness trio. And it's these 3 cards that really should be non-negotiables in your life. And it's spending time with your partner, with your friends, and yourself. I may be getting a couple of those confused, but it's like you get to be somebody outside of a parent and a partner. And it's giving you time to move into exploring your passions and exploring your hobbies and getting to do something outside of the daily grind of raising kids and running a household and going to work or running a business or what. We get caught up in all of that. And that could be a whole other topic. And actually, Eve's second book is called Unicorn Space, which is really getting into making time to find something that is solely yours that you are putting out in the world, whether that's cooking or piano playing or pottery or whatever that is. And we don't often know what that might be. And we don't give ourselves that time and permission to go do that. And for me, at least, if I'm given a couple hours to myself, I kind of panic and fall into that. Okay, what is on my to-do list that I can do right now? Instead of I'm going to go sit on my back porch with a glass of wine and a book, and I'm going to read. And some of that is because we're just way too tired, right? So the end of the day, if we have time, we're just going to watch Netflix or scroll on our phone because we're too exhausted to think about what might actually be not a better use of our time, but just a little more fulfilling than scrolling on your phone. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think we can find ways to just kind of fill our cup a little bit better, but we're too tired to do it. And we're not great at making that time for ourselves and for our partner. And so that's one of the long-term goals of this. And it could even be the first thing that you do. The first cards you get are once a month, we each get a Saturday morning or a Tuesday night that is just for one of us. And then maybe you throw in a monthly date night. And that's where you start. You let everything else go and sort of continue on as you have been, but you start creating that time that is just yours. And you honor each other's time. And it's not like I'm leaving the house and my kids are having a meltdown, I'm going to stay. It is, you got this, I'm out, and going to take that time. Even if you just go sit in your car in somewhere or a coffee shop for an hour because you don't know what else to do with yourself, but making that time. And I love that story of somebody who didn't know that he liked cooking and just uncovered this passion. And we may never uncover a passion for cleaning our house, but if we're both doing it, it doesn't feel quite as awful as if you're just like, oh my God, I do this all of the time and nobody cares. Yeah. Nobody sees how hard I work to keep this up. Or, you know what? I don't really care if my house is that clean. I'm not going to dust every week because it really doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And kind of where you might fall on that spectrum of all of that. But just taking that time to really figure that out, I think, is so important.
I love that the cards that you're mentioning are about that time, because I think we're living in a culture, but in a time particularly where so much value is placed on productivity. Mm-hmm. And this idea of being busy, and that is our worth, is like how busy we are, how productive we can be. Mm-hmm. And it really almost feels like an act of resistance to say, like, I'm actually, maybe my list isn't done and I'm still going to unplug because I just need to for my own sense of self and well-being and balance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you're going to come back to that to-do list and full of energy to tackle more of it than if you just keep chipping away at it and being exhausted. And you're just going to come back like ready. I find if I just give myself permission, just the act of giving myself permission to ignore my to-do list and go do something else, I'm almost energized to skip whatever that rest is and just go tackle my to-do list. Because I've simply just said, it's okay if you want to take the next hour to go read. And then you can come back to it. And then I come back more energized and ready to do it. And then you're more efficient and you get more done that way too.
Totally. Rest is so important and so undervalued.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so you are a facilitator in this work. Mm-hmm. So tell me what that looks like. I know you work in groups. Do you also work individually?
I do. So I do one-on-one work, one-on-one coaching and group coaching for moms around this. And on implementing it. I think it works better in a group, but I'm happy to tackle one-on-one the work of this, of just helping support moms implement it. Because for me, the sense of overwhelm and I have too much to do starts here. And then we can look at all of the other pieces that might fit into that, from boundaries to how you want to spend your time when you're not managing your to-do list. But starting with really evaluating what's important and getting some of that mental load off of your plate and shared with your partner, and that equity piece is just, I think it starts there. And so, yeah, it's the one-on-one coaching and group coaching in implementing this method, and then taking it from there.
When do you like to be brought in? Like, is it, it sounds so self-explanatory in the book, in the cards. So is it when people are just like having a terrible time doing it, or when they feel too overwhelmed to do it? At what point do you feel like you're most effective?
I think starting early on. We would start with almost that like kind of the unlearning piece of it. So let's examine all of the pieces that got us here and figure out how to unlearn them in our lives and look at them differently, so we can then build that deck. And then how do we dive into that? And so really as early on as possible, ideally. I will gladly step in if you just are determined to try it on your own, and you get partway down the path and you're just like, this isn't working, I need some guidance. I'm happy to step in there as well. But I think the earlier in the process you can have support, the more successful that you're going to be with implementation.
Yeah. And maybe the more positive the whole experience can be for everybody, right?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. Really getting that. It's sort of that pre-work. It's that setting that foundation is going to make everything else flow a little easier, and kind of dealing with that piece. But yeah, that pre-work is a very important step.
I love that you're taking a stand for moms, and you just stand with like, moms are doing too much,
Yes,
time
they
to
are.
stop. Yes.
It's time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we've just been told we need to, and I don't think that's true.
No, that's not true. Yeah. What else do you want to say to us that I haven't known to ask you about?
I think we've covered it. I hope that this all makes sense. I tend to get up on my soapbox with this stuff because I feel so strongly that we can change this, and that we need to do this work ourselves to create this for our partners, and that we're modeling this for our kids, right? I have 2 daughters. I want them to grow up knowing that it is not all on them to take everything on. And being like, so I think that's one of the really important pieces, is what are we modeling for our kids? And then we can go out and change the world, but we have to start here. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
where I'm focused.
I love it. Such good work. Thank you for sharing so much of this with us.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm curious. I'm a big fan of morning routines and rituals, and I'm curious if you have one, and if so, what it is and how it helps you.
So since my 10-year-old was a newborn, the rule in my house was we don't do anything in the morning until I have a cup of coffee in my hand. I don't have to be drinking it, but it has to be in my hand. And I get up now. My kids are, they're older, and so they're not the ones waking us up. But I get up. I'm usually the first one up. Sometimes my kids are awake, but they usually hang out in their rooms and read, or play on their iPads. And so they're quiet. Like, we've set that up so that they're not loud and obnoxious at 6:30 in the morning. But I like to get up and read the comics and the advice columns while I'm drinking my coffee. If that's the only part of the paper that I read every day, that is a-okay. And I start there. And then once I've read all of that, then I can move into the rest of my day and make breakfast and carry on. But I just want that 20 minutes to sip my coffee, read the comics, and then I can tackle everything else.
I love it. This is the first time I've heard that answer. I love this. I love asking the same question because you get so many different responses, but I have not heard comics. What's your favorite one?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know. There's a series. I mean, I don't even know. There's so many of them. Yeah.
Wow. I haven't seen the comics in a decade or more. That's awesome.
Now you're going to go search them out.
I am. Yeah.
Find them.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thank you
for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Cool. Awesome. Okay. Valerie, I'm going to link where people can find you in the
Mhm.
show notes. Do you want to just give voice to a couple of ways that people can connect with you?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram at Stride Productivity, and then head to my website as well. I have a private podcast that's just like a few minutes of episodes, the occasional text message cheering you on. And I've got some fun group stuff coming out this year, possibly just a variety of ways to engage with me and ways to implement the Fair Play method with support. And so you can follow me on Instagram or head to my website so that you can keep up with what I'm up to.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it.
yeah, thank you.